Good morning, everyone. Actually, good afternoon. This is going to go out in the morning because I just put up Chuck O'Celli's interview. I've got Lisa Ropars with me today. Again, somebody leaves a comment, a long, detailed comment. I like what I see. I invite them on, and they go, sure. So I'll give a platform. That's what we do. That's how easy it is to just leave a comment. I'll reach out to you, and then I'll put you on. So long as you're not crazy. So let me bring Lisa on. Hi.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. Okay, so we're going to talk ancient religions, right?
Yes.
Okay, so where would you like to start?
Okay. I would like to start with um I was always in a lot of my research what I was always looking into because I was always curious because of the most popular Western religion, let's say, is Christianity or Judeo-Christianity. So I was always very curious as to where did all these stories originate from, because they're all very similar when you look into a lot of the ancient religions,
Mm-hmm.
Egyptian, Greek, Mesopotamian, Babylonian. And when you really read their books, you'll see all of the same stories that are perpetuated throughout the Torah, the Jewish Bible, and then of course that goes into Christianity. More stories, especially the Christians were influenced the most, I'd say, by the Greeks and the Egyptians. Probably more so the Greeks. But what I was really interested in is, why is the creator God figure Yahweh? Why is he accepted as the creator? And where did this particular God originate from?
So Yahweh, correct me if I'm wrong, and we
Mhm.
both have studied Jordan Maxwell, and you know that
Yeah.
Hebrew is actually Phoenician Canaanite,
Yep.
and Yahweh was one of many gods. Remember, Elohim is plural.
Exactly.
Yahweh was he was
L is
chosen to be
singular.
right. He was chosen to be, but from my understanding, that goes to Phoenician Canaanite. Can you trail that back further than that?
Um, Actually, that is where I found it originates as well. And when you go back to what the Canaanites and the ancient Phoenicians believed, there was actually, I'm not sure if you've ever mentioned this in a previous video, you may have, but they found years back, an archaeologist found in a temple in Syria, which would have been ancient Canaan back then. They found carvings in the temple and on like clay pottery, clay vases, and it was carved out figures, archetypal figures of a god. And on there it said, um, "This is, in honor of Yahweh and his consort Ashtoreth, who's also known as Ishtar." And so then I
Asheroth
started.
was supposedly Yahweh's wife, right?
Exactly. It said on
And
it, they translated as
Ishtar is the origin of our Easter. She was a
Mhm.
fertility goddess, right? That's why you have
Exactly.
little bunnies with eggs.
Exactly. And that even comes from that, and then that went into the Greek version of their religion with the orifice egg and hatching, birthing the universe and whatnot. But so I started looking into what the ancient Canaanites and the Phoenicians believed, and yes, Yahweh was actually one of their pantheon of gods. That's what the Elohim was. It was a pantheon. And it's funny because it also ties into that particular pantheon in the ancient Gnostic texts, ties into the demiurge and his seven archons.
Oh my God, Miguel Connor would love you.
Yeah. And I'm not sure who that is.
He's from Eon Bite. He's a Gnostic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love Gnosticism. I mean, their creation story and whatnot is just, I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
so much information, and it's really incredible. But yeah, so, and
Do
it's
me a
even
favor. Can you define for people who are listening? Can you define
funny.
demiurge?
The demiurge is how the Gnostics viewed it, and it's funny, not all Gnostics viewed it this way, but
Mm-hmm.
the the predominant view of ancient older Gnostics was that the physical universe was created by a creator god that they call the demiurge, but he wasn't the god of creation. In the Gnostic story text, it was there was the pleroma, which was chaos, and Sophia was birthed from that. And Sophia is just the archetype for, she was pure wisdom.
Right.
And if you understand,
These are the lesser gods, right? As you put them.
exactly. Well, Sophia was actually, yeah, she was a main god. She was basically the main goddess, because all of these stories, they have to do with basic energy. Like
Mm-hmm.
Tesla said, you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And you need to, creation itself is done. You need two types of energy. You need the masculine and the feminine. Without those two, creation can't exist. And
Mm-hmm.
then in the physical realm, that goes down to where you need, everything starts with mentalism. You need the mind, and the mind is basically the masculine version, and then you put the will and emotion behind the mind, and that's the feminine aspect of energy. And then that births, it's the mind and the will, which is action, and the actions birth the physical manifestation.
You're basically also talking about the left brain male and right brain female.
Yes. But so Sophia was basically the female energy archetype, and she was known as wisdom. Think a wisdom, emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as the story goes in Gnosticism, she got the urge and decided to try and create on her own without the masculine father figure type of energy. And because she did that and didn't have the full aspects of creation working for her, she birthed what is known as the demiurge, which is a god. But because she didn't have the full aspects of she didn't have the male energy along with herself, the female energy, he was birthed as basically not pure. He was he came out as a, almost like, as some of them call it, an abomination.
Mm-hmm.
So she was ashamed of this. When she seen what she had given birth to, she was ashamed of it because she realized what she had done wrong, and she basically created something very unpure. So and they called him Yaldabaoth. And Yaldabaoth was cast out because of what he was looked as an abomination. So he was basically cast out of the highest heavenly realms, which was where, so basically, Sophia resided. So when he was cast out, he was left on his own, and being a figure that was not so pure and not all good, he had the aspects of good and evil. And since he was on his own, he decided that he was his own god, and he created his own universe. And that is what is known as the physical universe. He basically brought physicality into existence. And
It blows my mind that people take this stuff literally.
yeah,
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
exactly. Yeah. It blows my mind too that people actually think that there's deities residing above that are, like waving magic wands around and going like, poof, I'm going to create this, and poof, I'm going to create it. And it's really like, there's a whole much deeper meaning to it. And the funny thing is, I actually, a lot of times I go on, you're going to laugh at this, I go on Christian forums a lot, mainly because when I talk to people that understand these things, like you and other, truthers and people that have esoteric knowledge, everybody already knows this. So I go on Christian forums sometimes, and I'll listen to them bring up certain biblical stories, and I'll put out there what these stories mean. And I have to do it delicately, because if I just jump in and if I just basically say like, okay, well, here, let me tell you the origin of this, like they can't handle it. I mean, they really can't. And I actually I got into a discussion on a forum last night about somebody had questioned the story of Adam and Eve. And is it allegorical? Oh, it was the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. And is it allegorical or literal? And I left this long response about what the tree of life actually is. And especially, and, God bless Manly P. Hall. His was my favorite explanation of this, when he basically said the tree of knowledge represents your nervous system. When you put those two systems, your nervous system and the tree of life, is your circulatory system. It's your heart, it's your blood. And when under an X-ray, those two systems in your body, which are your two main systems, by the way, they look identical to a tree. Your spinal cord is the tree trunk. Your brain is the bulbous root of the tree, and then all of the nerve endings that go throughout your body
Hmm.
are identical to the branches of a
This is
tree.
sort of romanticized in Kabbalah as the tree of life too.
Yeah. And you can even tell by the story, like, that's why it's called the tree of knowledge. It's the brain. And I left in the comment, I said, what that is actually referring to when they eat the fruit. I said the story of Adam and Eve, if you really understand the creation, before they ate the fruit from the tree of knowledge, they didn't have a fully developed mind. They had the mind of infants. They were like children. They had no knowledge of right from wrong. They couldn't do wrong because they didn't know good and evil even existed.
Mhm.
That is a infantile mind. They were innocent. But once
Would
they
you say that a big part of the reason we find ourselves in the world that we are right now, a big part would be that the mass majority of people can't comprehend just how deep, esoteric, and wise our ancestors were to encode
abs-
them in such a deep, profound way where we can't even basically do that anymore, that
uh,
many levels.
I think it pretty much, yes, that's part of it. And I think the main problem, as you even said, the main problem in the world is religion. And what happened was our ancestors that knew this information, that taught it, a lot of the ancient priest classes,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't want that known. They wanted it. They wanted it kept. You had to be initiated to be taught these things. And as time went on, a lot of people that learned these things and were taught, what they did in order to control, as excuse me, as priest classes became on the rise, and Sadducees and Pharisees and priests became looked at almost as like as politicians, as the leaders of society. They started taking these stories that they knew very well what the esoteric knowledge was, and started passing them on as literal events in order to basically control people, so they could say, like, it's a perversion of what everything actually means. When you take everything from, again, as from the Kabbalah, from an aspect of the higher mind, when you take conceptual ideas, archetypal ideas that are meant to specifically broaden your mind and are meant to make people think and are meant to teach on on a spiritual level, when you take those ideas and bring them down into the carnal mind and say, okay, everything you said is completely literal, it's factual, and it happened, you're bringing something from a higher realm into a lower realm, and you're perverting it. It's not literal.
Oh,
When
you're
you make
good.
Yeah, when you make these things literal, you're inverting the entire story, and it's like,
You're very good. I can already tell I'm going to have you back on.
yeah, and it's like, no, like, no, none of that stuff. Like, you come it almost, you completely miss the point. And it's like take Adam and Eve when they talk about that. And as I was saying, it's the eating the fruit was the basically it's the development of the human mind. Like, I think it might have been you, I believe it was you that said the Bible was four things, and you said it was allegorical, it was metaphysical, it was anatomical, and what was
Alchemical,
and alchemical.
mythology, spiritual.
What it's not
Yeah,
is literal and factual history.
right.
And so I was saying that, I said the story of the tree is the literal creation of the human, what do you call it? Avatar of the human body.
Do you think psychedelics played a part in that?
In ancient times, I would say, I mean, there's no proof of that. Like, you won't find anything in any scripture, even like back in like the ancient ones, even but before the Bible, you won't find anything saying like, oh, you know, we found these plants and we ate, and that brought us into a whole new world. But I
Not
mean,
literally. They didn't literally do that, but there's plenty of
yeah,
stories that elucidate that feeling
yeah,
that get to that point.
exactly, like the manna in the desert. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm sure that that played a part in especially
Mhm.
when in their quote unquote prophetic visions,
Mhm.
Um, but it is amazing the ancient knowledge that they had, especially the Egyptians. I loved the what I actually passed it on to somebody too. when you had in one of your little short video clips, you had mentioned how the ancient Egyptians, when they would get a cut or an open wound, they used to rub moldy bread because that's where you get penicillin from. And it's amazing that they knew that. But back to the Adam and Eve story real quick. I'll finish it up. So that was the tree of knowledge. It's the development of the human mind. Once they ate the fruit, that's a representation of a fully developed mind, full awareness. Now they were aware. They know good and evil existed. Now if they did something that was out of line or that was out of harmony with creation, they knew they knew they messed up. That's a sin. And then basically the tree of life is represented by your circulatory system, which is your heart, that literally pumps blood through your body, that literally gives you the life, and it brings life to your body.
That's the whole idea of parting the Red Sea, by the way.
Yup, exactly. And that's why it's called the tree of life. And I don't know, I'm sure you've probably heard this. Do you ever hear people say that the soul, the human soul, is actually directly connected to our DNA, our blood? Have you ever heard anybody say that?
I haven't come across that, no, but I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, there's I can't remember where I heard it, but yeah, they say how they how they came to this conclusion is: did you ever hear of people that get an organ transplant? Let's say somebody needs a new kidney or a new liver, and the person, let's say the donor that they had passed on, and they'll get these transplants, and their whole personality will change. All of a sudden, they'll
Oh yeah, cellular memory for sure.
yes, that, and it's almost like they're taking upon a piece of the previous.
Yeah, you'll find that like there's a story of a man who committed suicide and and his heart went into someone else, and then that man committed suicide.
Oh, wait, I didn't hear that one. But yes,
Yeah.
the cellular memory, that's what I was referring to. And a lot of people that heard of that, they kind of made that connection where our soul is connected to our DNA, and you know, it's your blood, and it's our direct connection to the creator. And I said, yeah, and that's, you know, it's your heart. The tree, it's your heart, it's your soul. That's what the tree of life
Well,
is.
the heart is one of the three brains.
Mm-hmm.
Your heart and your mind.
Exactly. So, so I wrote all this down in the form, and and I'm explaining what the origin of the story is. And then I even left a funny comment, and I said, if you take the creation story literal, Adam and Eve, Adam was created from the earth. I said, a godlike, humanoid type figure didn't create a golem, and then do like a magical mystic Jewish rite and breathe life into. I said, that's not how it works. I said creation itself, it starts in the astral plane. It starts through thought, and it starts in the astral plane, and energetically it works its way down through the physical plane. It manifests through the physical elements, through carbon. I think I've heard you even mention carbon: 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons. It's all, there's so much science. And it's funny too, because a lot of people throughout history, they always disassociated science and religion. You can't have science and be religious. If you're religious, you gotta demean science. It's not, science discounts God. And true spirituality is a science. It's the science of the universe. It's the science of creation.
It is.
You can't have one without the other.
Would you agree that the characters in the Bible, they're archetypes, right? Would
Absolutely.
you agree that the main characters would be more, you can narrow it down a little bit and say they're Jungian archetypes even further?
What particular main character? Do you mean like Moses?
The hero, for example, or we can go into all of those later. But something just popped in my mind real quick. We were talking about Yahweh, and then we veered off course. Can we?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was saying how Yahweh was part of an ancient Canaanite pantheon, and in Canaan, the head god, the father god of creation, they called him El, just El, and then Yahweh was actually in one of the stories. I believe it's the Phoenician creation story. El had several, I think 70 sons, and Baal was one of them, and Yahweh was one of them. And in ancient Canaan and Phoenicia, they were worshipped as a pantheon. like I believe Yahweh was specifically a storm god. He was associated with storm. Other parts of Canaan associated with him with
Well, that's
volcanoes.
interesting too. You want to know why?
Why?
If Yahweh was because we talk about the story of Mount Sinai, Moses going up there,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
and then them hearing,
the,
um,
the rumbling and the it almost sounded like
right. But do
thunder.
you know that in Hebrew, the word I almost gave the wrong word. In Hebrew, the word for thunder translates to voices.
Oh no, I didn't know that. Oh, okay. Um, that's another thing too in the Bible when they say God spoke the universe into existence.
Right.
That's cymatics. That's literal sound.
Mm-hmm.
Sound creates patterns, it creates
Mm-hmm.
shapes, sacred geometry, and that's what creates that creates figures.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I was referring to is that God spoke. It's the frequency of the universe participating in creation, creating more parts of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so Yahweh, he was part of the pantheon, and in some stories, again, because ancient Phoenician Canaan, it was a very large region back when let's call it the when civilization first started, at least as
Mm-hmm.
far back as we have recorded and written records of it. Um, ancient Canaan was the region was rather large, and as time progressed and more, kings and more people came into power, it would break off into its own little subsects. And what they would do is a certain particular region would say they would favor Baal. And they would say, oh, Baal's their main god. That's who most of our temples are going to be built to. And then other sects would favor El, and other sects would favor Yahweh. And it kind of like it would be broken down to like the north region worship this main temple, and the southern region worship this main temple. And as time went on and these societies kind of started to spread out and break into their own nations, let's say, like their own particular
Mm-hmm.
laws, they started basically dividing up their own religion and their own belief system. And when everything was like back in ancient, when polytheism went, when they worship many gods,
Well,
there was
what they won't share with you, what they won't tell you, is that they have found in Israel, dug up from the Jews,
Mhm.
multiple fertility gods, different type of gods that were in the area. They were hardly monotheistic at the time. In fact,
Absolutely, yeah.
monotheism, I've traced it back to Akhenaten. And I know that the Jews get their beliefs, a lot of them, from the Egyptians. And at a certain point today, I want you to go over where some of these stories originate. Like you mentioned off screen, Gilgamesh and the flood, for
Mhm.
sure. I'd like to touch base on that. But it's
Sure.
hardly to say that the Jews created monotheism.
No, absolutely not. What's interesting about monotheism is when you really look at it, it wasn't even so much. It's not. I personally, I don't think it was so much borrowed from other countries or cultures. It kind of spread simultaneously, and I personally believe what that is attributed to is how you said when you go through these astrological ages,
Mm-hmm.
and these ages actually on a conscious level affect the earth. They affect the consciousness of the human beings on the
They
earth.
do. It's as
And
above, so below.
yes, and every 2000 years or so, the consciousness of humanity actually shifts and it changes. It develops and it grows. Now, the societies that don't change, that can't go along with that growth, they on a sense they de-evolve. They can't mentally, they can't consciously keep up with the
Well,
change.
Lisa, that's my contention with getting into the age of Aquarius when you're talking about the three
Mhm.
major religions, right?
Yes.
The age of Pisces was the age of belief, the age of Aquarius
Mhm.
is the age of knowing. And what do I tell people on my channel all the time that you might have heard? I tell people when something holds root and grabs some people and becomes a science or a medicine or something,
Mhm.
it becomes an
An entity.
organism.
Yeah.
And what does an
Identity,
organism
yeah.
do? Organisms fight for their survival. And
Yeah,
that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the very beginnings of the death throes of the Abrahamic religions right now.
exactly. And I think that's what happened back in the age of, as far back as at least I traced history, to the Babylonian civilization, the ancient Sumer. That was in the age of Taurus.
Correct.
And that's
So
where
was the early Egyptians too. Remember, Egypt was such a long time period. They literally had two
Egypt
different.
as well. When Egypt had its pantheon, Amun Ra, and
They had Amun Ra, and then thousands of years later, they had Horus. They literally had two separate sun gods. That's how long they were.
And but during the age of Taurus, which is why Baal, he was the primary god worshipped, at least in Canaan, in Taurus. That's why he was a bull, Taurus the bull. And but everything was polytheistic. There was a pantheon, there was multiple gods. And it's funny because societies back then seem to have gotten along. Even if they had different, everybody's pantheon was similar. So it was kind of like, okay, everybody almost believed the same thing. You come to the age of Aries, which is where, Akhenaten came into monotheism. And that's where, the story of, Moses and the 10 Commandments, that, the ram, that's why Jews blow the ram's horn. They're
That's why they were worshiping a golden calf, because they were worshiping the wrong time.
The wrong god, yeah. But as soon as the age of Aries hit, it's like all of these cultures at the same time shifted and decided, well, and a lot of them said, we're going to keep the pantheon. Like they kind of sort of kept the pantheon, but instead of these gods working together, it turned into there's a prime god that is the head of everything. And what happened when that happened, and as these different nations were, going off and spreading out and conquering new lands and stuff, as new nations started developing, they started becoming at odds with each other, because what they started doing, and I actually mentioned this in the comment, I said religion became very egocentric, and all these nations spread off, and they started, in their warped and inverted stories, they started saying, okay, we're our own nation now, and since God is, since religion is monotheistic, we're the chosen nation. Our God is the correct one. He's the head supreme God. He chose us.
Remember, guys, in the Egyptians, 1367 BC, Akhenaten started monotheism. But guess what? He said that God was the sun.
Yeah, exactly. And whatchamacallit, even in the Egyptian pantheon, they still revered the sun, right? Because like Osiris, I mean, that's the whole story of Osiris and Set, like Osiris walking across the Horus walking across the sky in 12 steps.
Well, that's why we still have a sun set at night.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the whole story of David, not David and Goliath, of Samson and Delilah.
When one of Santos videos, it's so funny how tiny little things can really like blow your mind. When Santos said in a video, in a time of ancient Egypt, they used to look at the sky, and how you said the sun tells the hour of the day. They used to look at the sky and say, "Where's Horus at today?" And what do we do now? We say, "What hour is it today?
Exactly.
What is the hour right now?" And it's literally Horus with the two letters switched.
Well, why do you think we have horoscopes still to this day?
I actually never even thought about that. That's funny. I never even thought about that, horoscopes. But so back to the ancient pantheon of gods. So that's what happened. As nations split off, they started feeling that they need to be superior to other nations. So in Canaan, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was southern Canaan, they kept Baal as their primary. He's the creator. He's our prime god. Our temples are dedicated to Baal. And then other ones, as it broke off, and that's what actually Judaism is. The whole Exodus story, and you even said the Egyptians are like the Chinese. They recorded history meticulously. There is no account of any Exodus.
That was actually during the 1977
mass Exodus.
During 1977, during the peace accords, right? This is what Anwar Sadat literally said to Menachem Begin. He goes, "This is not your land. You have absolutely no claim out of Egypt, because there was no written history out of Egypt. There's none, zero outside of the Bible records of any of this mass exodus."
What the at least what I found, what the Hebrews actually are is because they make it sound like they just the Hebrew people just poof came from Abraham. No, they didn't. Maybe there. I believe there might be historical evidence of like a small amount of Hebrews that were in Egypt that that left, but no mass exodus. The Hebrews were the Canaanites. That they're from the land. They were from they didn't come from Egypt and conquer that land. They were always in that land. They spread out into further Canaan. You know what I mean?
They were
But
Phoenician Canaanites.
that's what they were.
Look at
And
the
they
languages.
try to play it like, oh no, we're different. The Canaanites are our enemies. They're pagans and sinners. We're a different group of people. No, you originated there. They're your people,
Mhm.
And but as they kind of spread out further, and they kind of like moved throughout like Syria and was it Uruk or Urk? What is it? What is now Iraq?
So yeah, Uruk, which
Yeah,
is
Uruk.
where supposedly Abraham came from.
Yes, that's when what they call Yahwism predominantly came into play. And what was interesting about Yahwism is that even in the other ancient ones that still worship Baal and portions of Phoenicia and Canaan that worship El, they still kept their lower pantheon. Yahwism did away with that completely. In the beginning, they didn't, because I said you saw the carvings in the temple that said, "Praise be to Yahweh and His consort," meaning wife, Ashtra,
Yeah.
yes, Ashtaroth, yeah. So when it first started, they kept a little bit of it, but as when they started really pounding into, when they started really trying to conquer and had that consciousness that we're the chosen people, which every sect kind of had, but they really pushed it. They were like, no, Yahweh is supreme. And because, as you said, it's ancient, the ancient Hebrew is really ancient Phoenicia, you can see all the different sects of these ancient beliefs that different writers put into the story. That's why it says in the Hebrew scriptures, let us make man in our image. That writer was still conforming to the pantheon belief. You know what I mean? Uh,
Elohim is plural.
it absolutely is. And then some parts of the story they added, which were taken from later when Yahwism was just Yahweh. That's why they interchanged the name God so many times throughout the Bible. Like it's Lord and God and El and it's, they said it's all supposed to be talking about the same God of creation, and it's not. That's why he has so many different personalities, and because this God did this and this God did that, and they took them and just said, we're just going to
You
lump
mean
them in.
there's a difference between
Yeah,
the Old Testament God and the New Testament
of
God?
course.
You're kidding.
If anybody and I get it I get it that Constantine tried to play it off and be like, look, let's merge these together, and we'll say that we're gonna take our we're gonna take our Roman religion, and we're gonna say this is the Messiah. Everything that the Hebrews talked about and all their prophecies, our religion is the fulfillment of that. So we're just going to put those together, and now you have a new way to control the masses. But of course, they were two completely different religions. But
Mhm.
so as whatchamacallit, as Yahweh became, as they took all these different stories, when they wrote them down and they started, because you got to remember, everything was, they didn't write anything down. It was all done orally. When
Mhm.
they actually, what was it? I think they even wrote the Hebrew scriptures in like the first century AD. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, like maybe like third or fourth century AD. That's when they were first written down. Everything else before then was an oral story. And what happens when you tell like an oral story with anything else? It
It's the game of
morphs.
telephone.
Exactly, it morphs, it changes. I always say, like, did you ever tell this, like, have like a family, like a dad or an uncle that tells a story, like, let's say he went fishing and he catches a fish. He's like, yeah, I caught the fish and it was this big. And then when he tells a story again, or someone else tells a story, it's like, yeah, he caught the fish and it was this big. And the next
Mhm.
person's like, yeah, he caught a whale. You know what I mean? And it changes. It takes on like an archetype of its own. And that's what basically happened with the Bible. But what I found really interesting, one of the most main things, is that a lot of the personality that Yahweh has in the Bible is directly attributed to El, who was the main creator god, and
That's why they give you Micah.
That's why they all end in L. Absolutely.
All the names end in L. Michelle,
Exactly.
Rachel. They're
Well,
all ending in L.
the most
Daniel, Raphael, Michael, Raziel, all the
yep,
gods, all
Uriel.
the angels,
The
all
most
the Samael, all the angels.
the most interesting thing about that was that El was most associated with the demiurge. El was Saturn. He was the demiurge.
Correct.
And that's the main personality personification that Yahweh took on, or at least in the scriptures. So El was actually the demiurge. And what it's funny, what his they said he was in ancient times, they said he had 70 sons. That got dropped down to, in the Gnostic text, 7 archons, and they're represented by the 7 planets. Saturn, being El, is the head, is the they called him the chief.
Too.
Yes, the chief architect. And so, and it's funny, and I never even noticed this before, but I recently one time I was going over the book of Enoch, and I can't believe I didn't put 2 and 2 together. But when Enoch talks about the fallen angels and whatnot, he mentions the 7 archons. He calls them the 7 sanctons, the 7 sanctons in the heavens. It's the planets. Yeah. And I thought, because I never even realized.
So you guys understand, if you include Pluto as a planet, which you do if you do astrology, because Pluto definitely has some things.
They didn't. I know they didn't back then.
You guys have to understand is that the outermost planet was Saturn. The outermost planet was Saturn. They didn't know Uranus. They didn't know Pluto. And what they basically did was you have the 7, right? You have the 7 planets. You had 5 planets. You had Mercury, Venus, Earth.
Yeah.
And then you had 2
I
others.
actually didn't even count Earth. It was Mercury. It was Mercury, Venus, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn. So I mean, yeah, did they count Earth? So, I guess they did count Earth. It was the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus.
That was my point. Is that the Sun and the Moon were considered planets?
Yes. I think the order that they actually did it, as far as this 7
you
realms.
Forgot Mars. That was the one you forgot.
Yeah. As far as the 7 realms of heaven, I think the order that it actually went in was Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. I believe is the actual direct order that they came in. But it's funny. And I actually wondered, I went through this phase where I was obsessed with Saturn, because I when you start digging into like ancient,
the Jews are too.
Yeah, ancient history and like all the what is it, like the conspiracy theory, when you start going through all the rabbit holes, you start to see like, oh my god, Saturn worship is everywhere, like everywhere. And I was like, what is it with Saturn, the planets, even, and then you find out, oh, it's the black sun. Well, what the hell is the black sun? And then I know, like in the electric universe theory, they said Saturn was much closer. Some believe that Saturn was our primordial sun before our current star.
It was known as the black sun.
What was that?
It was known as the black sun.
Yes. And this is back in like the quote unquote, was it the last golden age or whatnot.
Well, Lisa, I don't know if you know this, but if you were to go to, let me show you something. No, okay. You know what? I'm not going to pull it up on the because we're already at 38 minutes. Okay. If you were to look up when Saturn was discovered, it'll tell you that Galileo found it in 1610 through his telescope, not knowing that you have earrings, wedding rings, everything was Saturn worship, the black cube in Mecca, the black cube.
It's actually drawn on like the oldest Babylonian tablet from like 6,000 on the tablet of Shamash. You know what I mean? There's an actual drawing of, I don't know, like, yeah.
Shamash, by the way, in Hebrew means sun.
Yes. Again, another sun god. But I became obsessed with like, why is everybody obsessed with Saturn? And then you get into where in the Greeks he was known as Kronos, and it is actually the same story in ancient was it Babylon? I believe in ancient, well, at least in the ancient Phoenician religion, it was the same thing. The the chief god El, who was associated with Saturn, he did the same thing. I think he what was it? He tried to kill his children. He was overthrown by his son. It's all the same story. And what was it that
it's the story of Jupiter and Saturn. Kronos and
Exactly.
Zeus.
Yes, there is. I don't know. Is it? I was going to say, is it possible? Is it possible to? I don't know how to screen share on this. Is it possible for me
Yes, pull it up.
to?
Pull up
Okay,
what you want to pull up.
perfect. I will actually show you. Have you ever heard of the ancient Phoenician historian? His name is It's very hard to pronounce. Um, Sanch. Uh, Sanchariathon, I think is how you say it. It's a
No.
very. He's an ancient historian. Here we go. Let me see,
So what
find.
you're going to do is you're going to pull up that website, and then on the bottom it's going to say present, and you're going to hit share screen, and then you're going to pull that up, and then I'm going to add it to the stream.
Okay.
You have to hit present.
All right, hold on, wait a second. I lost my my camera visual. I can't. I mean, I'm sure you can see me, but I can't see you right now.
Yeah, you have to hit present. Yeah, at the bottom where it says present and then share screen.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything that says present. That's why I'm like, wait a
You
minute.
don't see anything present at the bottom of the screen.
No, I'm off. I can't. I'm off the camera visual at the moment. I'm back on. I'm trying to get back to.
Go back to the StreamYard link.
All right, yeah, StreamYard Studio. Okay.
And then at the bottom it says present.
Why do I not see present? You know why? Because it's telling me. Because it keeps telling me to go to. For some reason, whenever I do this, it has to. I'm going back through Google. It keeps telling me to go back through Google Chrome, and I'm like, what?
No, don't do that. That's going to mess everything up. So we have about 20 minutes or so left. Can we touch base on?
Sure.
Can you give us stories
and
where they're from?
Sure. Actually, whatchamacallit, since I can't seem to get this back on here, I'll actually read this. There is a historian, and okay, I got it. Sanchuniathon. He was a Sanchuniathon. That's how I say it. He was a famous Phoenician historian, and this is back in early BC. What he did was he he recorded the ancient beliefs of all the people, the Hebrews, the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, the Greeks. He recorded them basically to try and find an accurate depiction and understanding of not only history but what all these different belief systems was. And one of the things that he recorded was what happened was he wrote everything down in ancient Phoenician, or Aramaic, and when he published, I believe he had it came into about 3 books. And what his writings were found by the church historian Eusebius. And what he did was, when he found his writings, he was blown away, and he said, yeah, he said, this is a very accurate depiction of everything. And in Sanchuniathon's writings, he talks about how the Jewish God actually came from these other gods and it was a pantheon. And Eusebius actually said that is correct. And then he's also known for saying that it is okay. It is not a sin to lie when it benefits the needs of the church. Like, what? You know what I mean? So they knew this stuff was accurate, and they just twisted it. But one of the quotes from his book, Sanchuniathon's book, it said, about this time, the descendants of Dioscuri put together rafts and ships and made voyages, and being cast ashore near Mount Cassius, consecrated a temple there, and the allies of El, who is actually Kronos, were surnamed the Elohim, as these same who were surnamed after Kronos would have been called Croni. And then he quotes, "It was custom of the ancients in great crisis of danger for the rulers of a city or their nation, in order to avert the common ruin, to give up the most beloved of their children for sacrifice as ransom to the avenging demons or gods, and those who were thus given up were sacrificed with mystic rites." And then he writes, Kronos, then, whom the Phoenicians called El, who was the king of the country, and subsequently, after his decease, was deified as the star Saturn, had by a nymph of the country named Anobret an only begotten son, whom they on this account called Ledud, the only begotten being still so called among the Phoenicians. And you can see, and this is where all these stories kind of amalgamated together, and it's really crazy. And even in what was it, here's a very interesting one that I found out. You know the historian Herodotus?
Go on.
Herodotus, in his second book, it was actually in his second book on the chapter 148, he writes, now Herodotus recorded a lot of things. He recorded he recorded the ancient Greeks, he recorded the Egyptians, never once, he recorded the Phoenicians as well. Never once did he mention the Israelites or Yahweh or any of this, Jacob, Abraham. But here's what he records about his book. This is talking specifically on Egypt. After the reign of the priest of Ptah, because that was also an Egyptian version of Ra, was Ptah. After the reign of the priest of Ptah, the Egyptians were made free, but they could never live without a king. So they divided Egypt into 12 districts and set up 12 specific kings. And then you get where, the 12 tribes of it. So where the 12 tribes of Israel come from, it was originally, they set up 12 districts in Egypt. And he wrote this not as like a belief. This was actually recorded Egyptian records that they set up 12 districts with 12 kings, or pharaohs. But yeah, it's insane when you go back and actually look at what these historians recorded and wrote down. Another ancient belief system was a version of the ancient Greeks. They were called I think it's Pelagians, I think, or Palace. I always forget the name. Palacians, a version of like a sect of the ancient Greek mythos. In their creation story, mirroring the Gnostics of Sophia. In their creation story, there was chaos, and the goddess Euronome, she emerged out of chaos. She was known as order. She created from chaos, was the head of the heavens, the the primordial goddess of everything. And what Euronome did was she was order. She took chaos and started making order in the universe. And she was dancing one day, and as she's dancing, she's moving her hands in a shape, a motion like a sine wave, and she creates a snake through that motion, and the snake was named Ophion. And as she's dancing with the snake she created, Ophion began lusting after her, and he tempted
Sounds a lot like Ophiuchus.
Yes, and Ophion tempted her, and she fell into temptation, and she became pregnant, and she birthed again, this is a version of the primordial egg. But the funny thing is, very specifically, one quote in this in this ancient Greek creation myth, it said, Euronome and Ophion made sorry, Euronome and Ophion made their home upon Olympus first, where he vexed her by claiming to be the shaper of the universe. So forthwith she bruised his head with her heel. And you know what I mean? And that's exactly in the Genesis story. That literal quote.
I broke that down.
Did you really?
Well, yeah. I mean, think about it. Her heel, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Genesis, they talk about a rider, the serpent biting the horse, and the rider falls off. Well, Ophiuchus is the man holding the basket, and the head's facing this way. right? So the head's facing this way, literally biting the heel of Sagittarius, and the rider falls off. That's where that comes from.
Yeah. See, it's funny. I don't know astrotheology as well as you. What blew me away that you did that really just, because I was looking into it myself and I couldn't figure it out. I knew about how Revelation 12, the woman clothed in the sun and standing on the moon. I knew what that exact alignment was. How it was like Virgo, Virgo in the sun, the moon beneath her feet. And then actually at one point on September 23rd, 2017, literally they had that exact alignment. I believe what was above her head? Um Leo was above her head, and I think Leo is 10 stars, and then there were two planets connected, and it was literally 12 stars above her head. But that whole constellation alignment is laid out. What I couldn't figure out was where the one where it talks about the beast with the, what is it, the the head of a lion,
Dragon.
the feet of a bear.
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
tetragrammaton.
And I was trying to, and I knew that it was stars, and I was like, where is the body of a leopard coming from? And when you put it together with what was it, cameloparditis, I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. And I was looking into that for so long, trying to figure. I was like, I know the bear is I know the little bear is Ursa Minor, and I'm like, a lion is Leo. I'm like, where the hell is this leopard coming from? And I was looking, and I could not figure out what it was. And when you did when you brought that up in one of your videos, I was like, that's it. I was so happy. I was like, that's where because I was searching for so long, and I actually didn't know about how do you say it?
Camelopardalis.
Camelopardalis.
Camelos, the camel. Pardalis means leopard. The
Leopard,
camel.
yes. But I actually didn't know about that one. I knew about
Well,
I
you know
knew
what? Lisa, if I could give you like a piece of advice, because you are familiar with the astrotheology,
hmm
the way that I break it down, I use the 12 zodiac signs, sometimes Ophiuchus, but what would probably benefit you is to read the Bible again, but this
I'm
time,
back now. I can see the camera. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. I couldn't see you that whole time I was talking. I could only see what I was reading from. But okay,
what
I'm
you
not
should
I'm not
do,
touching it again.
use Ptolemy's list from 150 AD of the 48 constellations.
That, it's funny that I know the that's what Santos teaches as far as the how should I put it? As far as the shape of the earth and the structure of the universe, where the planets are. I know he teaches the Ptolemaic version.
Mhm.
But yeah, I didn't know that. So I'll have to look into that. Yeah.
Because
I
there's
like
things that you can look at, like when they talk about the horses and chariots, right?
Mhm.
Well, the horse is Sagittarius, but guess what? In Gemini, directly across from it, there's a constellation called Auriga, which is the charioteer or the chariot. So it's the horse and chariot. It makes a
Yeah.
direct pattern in the sign. And that's what I basically use. I use the 48 constellations. I don't use them all, to be honest with you. Um, I try and look for direct interpretations instead of something that might stretch it,
Yeah.
because there's plenty of things that I could stretch, but I refuse to do that.
Yeah. Like
Um,
like a lot of the ancient Greek gods were constellation. Like Hercules is a constellation, Pegasus is a constellation.
Mhm.
Like they took their hero stories, and that's
Mhm.
what they attributed from it. I like it. I think you might be one of the first people, or one of the very small few people, that actually said, um when people talk about the Bible, and they see things going on now, and they say like it's prophecy being fulfilled. And it's funny because people, they do interpret literally, and they say that's how you know that the Bible is. And this actually drives me crazy. It makes like a switch flip in my brain when people, and this is said a lot on the Christian forum I go to, that the Bible is the literal word of God. Like it is, and they say it's infallible. It whatever is written there cannot, by the universe standards, cannot be wrong. And I thought, and I've even written on that forum, I thought it may be inspired by God. And I said, but first of all scriptures are inspired by God. It's only man that decided which one were heresies. You know what I mean? The Gnostic text, the Egyptian text, the Vedic text, they're, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they're all inspired by God. I said, but when you take that inspiration that comes from a higher realm, when you take that consciousness that you're connecting to and you try to interpret that, you're interpreting it through a filter, of a lower realm, of a of a basically of an unpure being. We're not we're connected to that consciousness, but it's but we're separate at the same time. It's filtered. So when they're writing down these divine inspirations, they're also taking their own individual perspective and adding it along with it. That's why that's why there's so many contradictions in the scriptures and stuff. And they're like, no, 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 God was very specific. They heard his voice and they jotted down everything they wanted him to say. And it made, and I go, the word of God is not a literal thing. I said, it's not written on a piece of paper. It's not written in a book that can burn. I said, it's not, there is no literal word of God. I said, the word of God is written on the hearts of the individuals that understand what these texts mean. It's written in the hearts of the man that were truly inspired, that truly understood what these things meant, and could harmonize with the universe. I said, that's what the word of God is teaching. I said, it's not God saying, okay, I want you to write down this descendant, this guy named Abraham. He's my chosen fella here. And okay, I gave him all these people here. Let me give you a genealogy. Make sure you record it. That's not, like, it's not how that went. And they really think that that's so. They're like, I've had people on the, and it's funny. The reason I write these things on different Christian forums is because they don't know this. And every once in a while, I'll get a small handful of people that will comment under the things I write, and they'll be like, wow, I didn't know that. That's very, can you tell me more? That's interesting. There are some that have open minds that are willing to accept it. But it's funny, the slew of comments that I get is, you're a heretic. What you're doing is, and God forbid, when I bring astrology into it, because I even talked about what you said, how Abraham, the story of Abraham and the Ten Commandments is actually the traverse of Taurus into Aries.
Moses in the Ten Commandments.
I'm sorry. That's what I'm going to say. Moses in the Ten Commandments is the traverse of Taurus into Aries. And I even said what you said. I said, that's why, he was so livid about worshiping a golden calf, because it wasn't the age of the calf. It's the age of the ram. Get it right,
Mm-hmm.
And they said, you're incorporating astrology. They said that's you're Satan worship. You're a Satan. And I said, oh, I said,
astrology predates Satan, right?
Yeah. And I said, did y'all forget about the book of Job that talks about the Mazzaroth? That literally says in scriptures.
Well, there's a reason why they don't translate that word.
Yeah. What
because
word?
They don't say
Mazzaroth. Yeah.
They leave it as Mazzaroth specifically.
And don't say Zodiac. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but it even says in there, he who, what is it? He who bound the belts of Orion and the Pleiades. It even mentions specific constellations. And I said, your ancient prophets and ancient philosophers, I said, they were expert astronomers and astrologers. I said, they knew exactly how the sun and the planets moved. I said, remember, there were no, they didn't do calendars back then. The sky was their calendar. That was their map of the world. They did everything by the stars. And what they did, they would take their knowledge of the stars and they would incorporate it in their teachings as allegory. And when I go on Christian forums and I talk about how the Bible is an allegory, people lose their mind. I mean, they really get upset. And it's funny, I know a lot of people. I don't think you subscribe to the historical Jesus. Me personally, I think that perhaps there was a teacher back that whose name was actually Joshua. That's what Yeshua is. It's Joshua, not
Right.
But I think there was perhaps a teacher. Some people say there's a story that says, oh, it was actually the son of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. Did you hear that one? They say that they say, oh, it was actually, his name actually means son of Isis and whatnot. But there was probably a historical prophet or teacher that taught the teachings of Christ. I said, but the way his life is written in the Bible, the entire story of his life is an allegory. I said, his teachings are literal, his teachings are real. I said, and the teaching that Christ taught are truth. I said, because they're found in Buddhism. They're found in ancient Egypt. They're found in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I said, what he taught, like the primary, the golden rule, do unto others as you would do unto you. And the way he, how he even says in the scriptures, he talks about the inner Christ, the kingdom of heaven is within. And I love how no Christians like ever bring that up. And it says that all these things that I have done, you shall do more. And they never bring it up. And because it's Gnosticism. It's talking about it's talking about the inner Christ,
Right.
And so I said that the allegorical story of Jesus is not only the story of the literal sun in the sky, step by step, that literally. I said, but it's the story of us. It's the story of humanity. It's the story of a human. It's the story of a human soul, traversing the carnal mind and becoming awakened. When the Christ within is when it's your third eye. It's your awareness. It's when you realize what we actually are and what we're connected to. That's why. That's part of all that. That's part of all I don't want to say the best word I can use is pacifistic. I don't like the word pacifist, but that's kind of why the teachings of Christ are do no harm. They're very much against if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. When what we fight, we become. When you harm other aspects of creation, when you harm other people, you're harming yourself, because we're just, that's all everybody is just an expression of that one, of the universe itself, that one single consciousness.
Mhm.
But they don't want it. They don't like that. They a lot of the Abrahamic religions. I find Buddhism more truthful in the religious aspect than the Abrahamic religions just butchered these texts. I mean, they inverted these teachings almost as much as Islamist and Satanism. Like, you know what I mean? Buddhism at least kind of still understands the connection of consciousness and everything. They don't get everything right 100%. No teaching does. But within the Abrahamic religions, they really believe that God is outside of the universe. The creation has nothing to do with the creator. That's
Right.
what they really believe. And I think it was you that even said you can't have an omnipresence and have it not be a part of everything. It's not possible. You can't have something that's outside of everything but still sees every detail inside of something. It's not you know what I mean? The reason that God knows all and is everywhere is because he is everything. There's
Exactly.
no there's no difference between the creator. The creation is the creator. It's
Right.
you know what I mean? And it's funny. And when I've tried to teach, that's what I said. That's why I put these things on Christian forums, because every once in a while, that little bit of people that are like, I never thought to look at it that way. Let me look into this. And that's great. And I even say, when I'll make comments, I'll say, listen, I'm not trying to change anybody's beliefs. I don't care if you accept this information or reject it. I say, I'm putting this out there because it is a truth. It is a universal truth. It is ancient esoteric knowledge. I said, and if you read it and if you understand it and know how to apply it, you will gain wisdom. That's, you know what I mean? That's what does it say in the scriptures? Knowing the truth will set you free, for my people perish for lack of knowledge. That's how the system works. It's first you get the knowledge, then you have to understand the knowledge, you apply it, you apply that understanding, then you gain wisdom, because you can't have wisdom without experience. Wisdom is experience. And so every once in a while people say, okay, that makes sense, I get how that ties together. But them hardcore Bible believers, man, they try to crucify me on that. I'll say, and they'll say, you're a heretic, you're this and that. And then I'll just write back and I'll be like, well, if that's what you believe, doesn't mean it's true, but okay, go for it. And yeah, but they get very, very upset. And I don't, like I said, I don't discount that there was a literal man named Joshua that went around, and I believe, that went to Egypt and Tibet and learned these mystery schools. I'm sure he taught people in he taught people in in Jerusalem and over in that area. I'm sure he taught them these teachings. He was a great, he was a teacher, but how his life is recorded, that just didn't happen. It's a complete allegory,
So, Lisa, we've got about a minute left.
Okay.
So, what I want to do is I want to have you back on, and I want to exclusively have you link biblical stories
Okay.
to past stories. For example, guys, the Epic of Gilgamesh has the flood.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're gonna say everything has the flood. Well, does everything also have in the Epic of Gilgamesh a bird bringing a branch
The
back?
raven and the dove. Yeah, I mean it is a literal. If it was a modern story, they would be copyright sued. You know what I mean? Like, it is a literal, almost verbatim. And I found this out. Did you know that the ancient Babylonian creation story, where we get Genesis from, in the original creation story of Babylon, and this is back what is it? Anu and Enki and Enlil. It has the exact steps of creation verbatim that are recorded in Genesis. It says, like, on day one, except instead of saying God, it says the gods. It says on day one, the gods created the heavens, and then, like, one day two, he created the earth. What was it? Then it was the animals were created on day 5. Then on day 6, God created man. And then on day 7, he rested. I mean, word for word, they took it out of the ancient Babylonian creation story, the story of Genesis.
We'll have to touch base on all that. I'm gonna have you back on soon. You have my email. I want you to let me know when you're free.
Sure.
In the next 2-3 weeks, and then I'll have you back on, and we'll definitely do that. But Lisa, thank you so much for this.
Oh, no, thank you. I love talking about stuff like this, especially when people understand it,
Right. I hear you. So, if people wanted to, I don't know, find you on social media, talk to you, because people do that.
Believe it or not, I actually don't. I don't have a website or anything like that. What I'm doing is everything that I've collected. What I'm doing is kind of like you. I'm recording it. And I'm trying to write a book, but not like a how you fictionalize everything in a story. I'm trying to do it as almost like a written record of where all these origins come from. And I have so much information, but I don't know how to organize it into a book yet. Like, I have, okay, this story is here, and this goes with this, and this goes with this. And I almost don't know where to start as far as like piecing it together. But that's what I'm actually in the process of doing.
Email me in the background, and I'll help you.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much.
So, Lisa,
great.
thank you for coming on. I'm going to have you back on soon. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Thank you.